Hello, welcome back to the Arturia DX-7 tutorial series. My best bit when we do preset deep dives, because this is where we figure out how the synth really works. We want to hear it as a musical instrument. I've picked the distorted FM noise preset. This is a stock preset, and this is what it sounds like. So we've obviously got a mono sound here. We've got a monophonic synthesizer. And we've got some pretty heavy portamento going on. We've also got quite a bit of noise. We'll have to figure out where that's coming from. And we can see in our algorithm that we've got two carriers. Well, let's throw one of them away to make life a little bit easier for ourselves. So by disabling carrier 4, we've effectively shut this entire chain down. Now we're just looking at the left-hand side where carrier 1 is doing the heavy lifting. And we've got this kind of square wave going on. Now if I press and hold a note, you can see it starts out at a square wave and then modulates. So we've got some kind of envelope operating on it there. We can also see that operators 2 and 3 are turned off and don't seem to be having anything to do with the sound, and operator 1 is at 0.25, so it's 2 octaves below the played key, and here's our square wave. Let's have a very quick run through the tabs and get a general idea of what kind of stuff's going on under the hood. So on the envelopes page, all of the envelopes for all 6 operators are boring as you like. On the mods page, we've seen this before, the little vibrato effect we get off the tuning setting. On the second page, we've got a single value, but it's dealing with operator 4, which we've currently disabled, so we'll ignore that. We're going to come back to all this stuff. And in the third page of the macro screen, things get a lot more interesting. So let's just restrict ourselves to operators 1, 2 and 3, and probably only operator 1, because it looks like 2 and 3 are disabled. It's a little bit weird when I was deconstructing this preset. Operators 2 and 3, you can see some cutoff action going on over here. They don't have any direct effect on the sound unless you crank their levels right up to the maximum. Now I'll leave you to do that if you like. That's the way to actually bring operators 2 and 3 into the party, but then they're not having an effect on this sound. Operator 1 is, of course, that's the carrier. And we can see that macro 1 is acting as a cutoff slider. So if I press a key and increase macro 1, it's going to get brighter. Now there are 2 different effects operating on the operator's cutoff, and you can see them. The first one that we've just dealt with is the slider, but we've also got modulation envelope number 1 being mapped to the same value. So both of these sources need to be considered together. They're both having an effect on the filter cutoff. And we can see here's mod envelope 1. Now I've turned the slider up to maximum, and so we're not really getting an opportunity to hear it. I'm going to have to turn it back down to let the envelope have some effect on the filter cutoff. And there it is. Change the shape. And now we can reintroduce the macro value. It's called cutoff for obvious reasons. And those 2 effects together are combining to have the total net effect on our filter cutoff. Now mods level is really important, but it's much more interesting on the other chain, so we'll deal with that shortly. Then we've got 2 effects to look at, FX1 and 2, and these are mapped to a couple of macros. Now macro 3 is called delay level, and macro 4 is called phase level, so I'm not giving you any prizes for figuring out what those 2 effects units are. So let's macro 3 is the ping-ponging delay, and here's our phase. Very nice it is too. We've also got a compressor on. Now I'm going to tell you in all honesty, I am a huge unfan of compressors in synthesizers. I understand that they have a value, but seriously, it's just not the place. It's effectively a volume. It's a glorified volume control. Let's call a spade a spade. So the two chains, the left-hand one terminating in carrier 1, isn't super interesting. It's little more than a glorified square wave. The other side of things, however, there's a much more interesting sound. Let's see what's going on there. So let's start right back at the overview. What is operator 4? It's a sine wave. Doesn't sound very much like one. Let's temporarily turn 5 and 6 off. It's a sine wave. Let's bring operator 5 back in. So here we have a sine wave modulating a sine wave. And we need to be careful not to get too carried away about our feedback loop here, because while operator 6 is disengaged, there can be no feedback loop. The feedback loop is feeding into a modulator that's currently off, and so it's not active. Here's our feedback control. It's not doing anything. If I bring operator 6 back in, right click, now that's where all that harshy raspiness is coming from. It's coming from the feedback. Remember when we talked about more and more harmonics eventually become all the harmonics, and all the harmonics is noise. Now at the moment we've still got our cutoff slider turned all the way up. Let's bring it back down. And I also remember that over on the previous modulation page, we've got the mod N1 having an inverse effect on operator 4's resonance. So again, try to kind of get your head around this inverted thing. If the graph, if the envelope is going from high to low and we've got a negative value, then it's flipped. It's starting up with no resonance and then introducing resonance as the rest of the sound gets pulled away. As the frequency cutoff is reduced and we lose more and more of the upper frequencies, the resonance is actually cranked up. It's just smoothing that initial stage of the curve by basically taking all the resonance off and then reintroducing it as these two effects, the filter cutoff and the resonance, pass each other. Now what I think is the most interesting single value in this preset is this one here. Mods level is really significant. It's a really important level because what it does is it allows you to increase the level of all modulators simultaneously. There are 4 modulators in this preset. 2 of them are in use, granted, but mods level allows you to turn them both up at the same time. So what this value via macro 2 is doing, it's called FM gains, is turning the levels of both of those operators up simultaneously. Let's do it manually first. It's a really dramatic effect on the sound over a very, very small period of time. I'm just going to throw all of that stuff away and get back to our basic sound to demonstrate that this value here, this 2% change in those modulator levels, has an effect on the sound, has a dramatic effect on the sound. That's what changing your modulators by just 2% can do. Let's take the feedback away so that we're just getting a single forward moving stream. And we can further enhance that with the modulation wheel. Now bear in mind I just threw the sound away, so we've got to make sure that we don't inadvertently bring the tremolo back in, the vibrato back in as well. But we get that extra little, almost an extra 1% out of the modulation wheel. And even that is really noticeable. There it is at maximum and minimum. That's less than 1% change to the modulator levels. And obviously Mod N1 is applying to the operator 4's cutoff just in the same way that it was to the operator 1. It's much more static. So that's our first deep dive complete. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please do hit the like button. Have a look below for my Patreon details if you want to support me, and I'll see you for the next one. Thanks very much.